Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. So, today's book, Daughter of the Empire, by Raymond, Feist, and Janny Wurts, is actually a spin-off. You see, Raymond Feist wrote the Riftwar Saga, and the Riftwar is a series of books that it's Magician Apprentice, Magician Master, Silverthorn, A Darkness at Sethanon, Prince of the Blood, King's Buccaneer. There's a whole series of these books. And I wound up reading a bunch of them after I read this Empire Trilogy, Daughter of the Empire, Servant of the Empire, and thirdly, which I will obviously be getting to third, Mistress of the Empire. These three books I read first, and then I heard about this Riftwar Saga, and, I read the books, and, you read the various notes and publication information and stuff, and that tells me that Raymond Feist has written this series. So I went and I tried reading the Riftwar, the other side of the Riftwar, and I just didn't find it as entertaining, interesting, fun, what have you, as this trilogy. I suspect that people will like the Riftwar Saga, who like those kinds of things. They're standard epic fantasy novels about a more or less, pseudo-European fantasy world that gets invaded by a bunch of people from the other side of a magical wormhole to an alternate reality that they call the Rift. And various exciting things happen. The other side of this, the Daughter, Servant, and Mistress of the Empire trilogy, this was written effectively as a spin-off. It's saying, you have these invaders from the other side of the Rift. Who are these people, and what are things like where they're from? And so that's what this is, and I will also state for the record that I was very disappointed when I tried reading the Riftwar Saga, because maybe I missed it, maybe there was a book that talked about it somewhere, but there was a particular character who doesn't come up until the second book that I had totally thought would appear in the other side of it, and he didn't, and I was super disappointed because I had totally wanted his side of things. But I will discuss that in more detail when I'm reading the second book. This first one is... Now, these three books are about this daughter, servant, mistress of the Empire character, and her name is Mara, and she's part of a family of mid-level nobility. She's not sort of bottom-rung nobility, but she's not at the very top rung either. And the book opens with her planning to become a priestess of the Temple of Lashima, goddess of the inner light. And effectively, she's going to become a nun. And so she's in the process of, in effect, taking her final vows, kind of metaphorically speaking, and this cover scene that you're seeing here is actually the opening scene of the book, when the man who is the head of her father's army, of her father's men, that he comes in and he says that they need the Lady of the Acoma to come with them. And what that means in this particular case is that he wouldn't have burst in there, first of all, for any reason except an emergency, but second, by calling her Lady of the Acoma, that's how she knows that her father and her brother, who was the heir to the name, have both died in the wars on the alien world on the other side of the rift. And she gets basically taken out of this life of religious contemplation she had planned to be part of, and has to take over the family seat. And the interesting thing is that Kelawon, the world that they're on, and the Empire of Tsuranyuani, and their people are called the Tsurani, she has to, in effect, enter into this incredibly Byzantine, bloody politics that they call it the Great Game. And it's a really, really vicious and tradition-bound society that it bears a lot of it owes a lot to, I think, in a lot of ways, Japanese culture. It owes a lot to a lot of Far Eastern and Middle Eastern and African cultures in various ways and places. But in particular, as I would say, it owes a lot to things like Japanese culture and Korean and Chinese, because there's a lot of store set by emotional restraint. And this isn't just a stiff upper lip chaps thing that you get from the English. This is about you do not express any emotion at all. You know, when she hears that her father and brother are dead, she basically can't cry in public, because to do so would shame her family, and then her house would lose public standing because somebody saw her expressing grief over the death of her family, and they would think less of her, and then people would actively move against her family and actively cause problems. And in effect, the way honor works in this society, there's a whole bunch of things that we would recognize as, honor, but one of the things that they have doing is you're only in trouble if you get caught, meaning you will be considered honorable as long as everybody has complete plausible deniability that you did a thing. That unless somebody can prove that you did something, even if everybody knows that you did it, even if the slightest investigation would prove that you did it, as long as there is plausible deniability, you haven't done it and you are honorable. That's how the Minwanabi, who are the bad guys in the first two books here, the Minwanabi arranged for her father and brother to be killed by basically having them sent out into the field to face the forces on the other side of the rift, and then waiting until their forces had been decimated to sweep in and save the day. And so Mara is put into a very problematic situation. The garrison has been decimated. There are 38 soldiers of what used to be several thousand. And, there's no air and all kinds of other things like that. And so this book is about her desperately finding ways to circumvent traditions, to work around traditions, to be super sneaky. All spoiler zone, I'm telling you right now, so if you don't want to be spoiled, you should probably leave, because, I don't care if I ruin it for you. The thing is, you can see on the back here it says, but first she must rally an army of rebel warriors. What she decides to do is to take a bunch of men who have been declared without honor because their masters died when they couldn't do anything about it, or who had been sent away from their masters because of, minor infringements of the law, and she basically takes them in and says, you guys can become warriors, join up with me here. And while everybody's not really sure, because it's considered bad luck to be one of these gray houseless warriors, all this kind of stuff, they figure better to die in the service of a house than to keep on being out here acting as though we don't have any official honor. And throughout this book, this is very much about somebody who does a lot of bad things. She marries a man, has him named as the Lord of the Acoma, and arranges for him to have to commit honorable suicide, a sort of a seppuku thing. She arranges for him to dishonor himself and forces him into having to commit suicide because that's the way she's going to save the family name, get an official proper heir, and get back control. Because she's a woman, and obviously she can't have control of stuff unless, men are done away with. And so she marries a brute, is horribly mistreated, and arranges for him to be killed. And in one of the very poignant moments in this novel is this moment when he looks at her and he tells her, "You're going to watch this. I'm going to go through with this because it is the only way that I can honorably expiate this sin that you have tricked me into committing. But you're going to watch this and you're going to know that when you do these machinations, when you twist people, when you do these things, there's a very real human cost." And the thing is, up until that specific moment, she's been having various triumphs that were basically relatively bloodless. That, she wasn't losing her people, that she'd figured out how to keep one of her most loyal and best warriors alive, even though her actions had accidentally caused him to do something that would be seen as dishonorable. And she's figured a workaround for that. She has gotten these gray warriors and gone from a garrison of 38 to 200, which is certainly better than it was. She managed a coup, snatching out these giant insect people to sort of take up residence on her land and provide her with, services and all kinds of things like that. And there she is, having had success after success, and this is one more success, but this time there's been a human cost. A man has been forced into having to kill himself in order to keep from being dishonored, in order to keep this family he had been married into from being dishonored, in order to, all of these various things. And it's a very sharp and harsh lesson. And the lesson about the human costs of people's actions, the lesson about the fact that she does a whole bunch of things, effectively forces people into having to kill themselves to maintain honor, all kinds of other stuff. She keeps on doing these things, not because she wants to win at the game, although she does enjoy playing the politics, but because people keep on backing her into these corners. And in the end, she defeats the Minwanabi guy, but she would never have been facing off with him, would never have forced him into this, would never have done all of these sorts of things if he hadn't effectively forced her hand by murdering her father and brother, thus taking her out of her life as a priestess. And if he hadn't, effectively kept on pushing and trying to ruin her life and ruin her family name and destroy the Acoma. And so it's sort of this repeated, it's sort of a very repeated theme throughout this book and the other two, that she does a lot of things that she would never have done if other people hadn't backed her into it. Now, there are other things that she does that are perhaps not nice, that are strategic, but ultimately, these books tend to be very much about the human cost of playing for power. And that's basically my time, so I will see you all with the next book next week.